If the New Orleans Saints offense is going to improve in 2025, it's going to come down to three key factors, coaching and play calling being the most important. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I'm going to give you three defensive players that have a real opportunity ahead of them with bigger roles on the way. We're going to lead everything off today looking at the New Orleans Saints offense and the three key factors that will force that offense to improve in 2025, or most important, towards taking those steps to improvement in 2025. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listener, for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If the New Orleans Saints offense is going to improve in 2025, it's going to come down to three key factors. The first one that it just kind of is what it is because it's always the case is health. We'll highlight that a little bit, but the two most important things out of the three for me are going to come down to coaching as well as play calling. The New Orleans Saints offense has not seen a lot of change so far this offseason. So far, the only new faces that have really come in for New Orleans that aren't returning faces, well, really, it's just one. It's just Velus Jones Jr., the wide receiver, running back, convert. There's been some players that have been away from the team for a little while, like Will Clapp and Brandon Cooks, who have now found their way back to the team. All fine and dandy, all good. But the New Orleans Saints didn't really influx a ton of talent over on the offensive side. They didn't really influx a ton of new and unfamiliar talent at all across the roster, with some exceptions like Justin Reed and Devon Godchaux. But for the most part, this team going into 2025 is the team that it was at 2024, or at the end of 2024, at least to this point. And so the expectation around improvement for the New Orleans Saints offense is going to have to come from somewhere else other than just the players. Yes, health will be a key factor, just like it is each and every season, because there will be a big difference between a team that is healthy and a team that is not. But even when healthy, the Saints showed some concerning traits outside of the first two games of the 2024 season, inconsistencies and challenges in navigating adversity. Kind of everything had to be perfect. All those other things. You don't want to see that in 2025. And so if the roster isn't going to change, the coaching staff becomes the most important piece behind all of it, in addition to health. Let's look at where the Saints were and finish the 2024 season. In terms of passing yards, they were 23rd in the NFL. In terms of rushing yards, they were 14th in the NFL. Not bad when it comes to that, right? The upper half of the league when it came to it, but 15 rushing touchdowns put them right in the middle of the league. You look at other metrics such as points scored, 24th in the league, total yardage, 21st in the league, even time of possession, 26th in the league, not being able to string together long drives. Average play per drive, they were 21st in the league. Points per drive, 23rd in the league. So they did not, even though they were able to pick up some rushing yards, even though they were just outside of the top half of the league when it came to passing touchdowns scored, even though they took care of the football for the most part, at least when the quarterbacks were healthy and all these other things, that's where you saw some production. But the production didn't often end up in the end zone, despite the fact that this team started off by scoring over 90 points in the first two games. So for me, it's got to come down to coaching and play calling being the big difference makers here going into 2025. The Saints are effectively treating their injured reserve like free agency. Look, we're getting this player back and this player back. This player should be healthy. That player should be healthy. And as long as everybody stays that way, then great. But then it's got to come down to, can your coaching staff, which is entirely new with the exception of a few people that stuck around, Keith Williams at wide receivers coach, Jari Evans getting his promotion up to assistant offensive line coach. Then you get some familiar faces and guys like Brendan Nugent and Joel Thomas coming back, and then a couple of other holdovers in terms of assistants and things like that. But for the most part, this is an entirely revamped New Orleans Saints offensive coaching staff. And if you remember right, The Saints tried this back in 2024. They tried this last year. They tried a version of it in 2023 over on the defensive side where they flipped that defensive coaching staff and then made some not so strong hires like Todd Grantham on the defensive line and all those other things. Last year, though, we saw them revamp their entire offensive coaching staff, keeping only tight end coach Clancy Barone, really, and then bringing in new wide receivers coach, new quarterbacks coach, new running backs coach, new offensive line coach, new offensive coordinator. They revamped the whole thing. This year, they do that all again. Now, can this coaching staff help this player roster manage adversity? Can it help them be more calm? Can it help them navigate certain situations where maybe things don't go your way, whatever it might be? And can it string together through strong leadership a consistency that we have not seen for the New Orleans Saints offense since Sean Payton, right? One of the biggest issues with the New Orleans Saints offense isn't that it's been ineffective. There have been times where it's been ineffective, but really the thing about it is that there are times where it's also been super effective, right? Like Thunderbolt on a Squirtle, just super effective. And in those moments, what you've kind of always gone, like go back to the Taysom Hill game plans of the 2023-2022 season, to where he was a huge part of the offense one game, and then he disappeared for a couple games, then huge part of the offense for another game, disappear for another couple games. Inconsistency, right? The thing that was most consistent about that New Orleans Saints offense over the course of the past few years has been its inconsistency. Coaching has got to fix that. Coaching matters. Coaching has got to be the thing that ends up having that impact. One of the advantages now that you might have over the offensive side is that your head coach is an offensive and is the offensive guy in Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore has proven to be an excellent play caller. He's proven to be an excellent game planner in the NFL. We don't know yet what he's like as a rah-rah guy, a leader, a vocal guy, a head coach, all that other stuff. We'll figure that out. And the team will figure that out. The Saints themselves will figure that out. Kellen Moore will figure that out. But when it comes down to the performance of the team on the field and what you're getting out of the offense, Kellen Moore has got to be able to strike a balance for this team in order to allow them to be and find greater consistency. When they are a one-trick pony, which is effectively what they were last year, they were an outside zone team that every now and then looked to fire deep and then couldn't do that after it couldn't do either of those things after injuries set in. It created the inconsistencies because defenses adjusted to what it was that they were doing, and then the Saints had no counterpunch. They did not have the ability, with Clint Kubiak at the helm as the offensive play caller, to adjust and to change. That was one of the biggest issues for New Orleans. That is something that has got to be different here in 2025, and that's where Kellen Moore comes in. It's why I always stress the way that he wants to treat the run game. Not too much man, not too much zone. Not too much inside, not too much outside. Striking a balance in between all of it. The Saints have invested in speed at wide receiver. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks. But they can't be a just downfield, passing attack team. They've got to be able to open up underneath and attacking the middle of the field. That's where guys like Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill when he's healthy, and maybe even an additional acquisition at wide receiver need to be able to help them. They've got to be able to attack multiple levels of the field, and they've got to be able to run the football effectively. And the best way for them to do that is to be able to do it in a way that's balanced and diverse. If they're able to do that, they're in a much better place in 2025 than 2024, but that's going to come down to play calling and coaching. And of course, health will be in there too, but that's never not the case. Coming up next, while the New Orleans Saints offense hasn't seen a lot of change, we'll be relying on the coaching staffs for a big part of its hopeful improvement going into 2025. The New Orleans Saints defense is going to be relying on some young players who are going to be getting opportunities in new roles. I want to tell you about the 3 young players on defense that I think are in line for the biggest opportunity with their expanding roles next, as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you everything you need to be able to take advantage of all the great things happening around the college basketball tournament, all tournament long. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets by simply winning your first $5 bet. That's all that you got to do, and then you get $200 in bonus bets to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories to even who's cutting down the net at the end of it all. I like recommending your first $5 bet on the money line of a heavy favorite. So Maryland, Colorado State facing off later on today in the men's tournament. Maryland 7.5 point favorites, one of the biggest spreads you're going to find in this evening's matchups. I like the money line there. Put $5 down. You can win $1.49 if you win. And if you do, you get $200 in bonus bets as well. And that's going to get you all set up today over at FanDuel.com, where you can make every moment more throughout all the college hoops action all tournament long. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and then wonder, where did all my money go? Hey, look, we've all been there. And so between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it can be hard sometimes to keep hold of your finances. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's like your personal CFO that offers you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a lot more than that. It's a complete financial command center, everything from your investments to your accounts to your spending, all in one place, even your goals as well. They even have some cool stuff to where you can like create collaboration opportunities with people. So if you're managing your money with somebody else, you can easily track and share all of those shared and personal accounts. You can set goals and make sure that everybody's on the same page without all of the stress. I love the Monarch Money app. You will too. Take control of your finances today over at Monarch Money. Just use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. I got 3 defensive players, young defensive players, who I think might have major opportunities ahead of them in some larger roles here in Brandon Staley's defense as the New Orleans Saints is going to need a youth movement here pretty soon over on the defensive side of the football. Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, guys in the defensive line, guys in the secondary, they're back here for 2025. But what does that future look like beyond 2025, going into 2026? What's the future at safety? What's the future at linebacker? What's the future on the defensive line? A lot of these younger guys are going to have an opportunity for a proving ground here in 2025 to kind of set themselves up to be a big part of where this defense heads in its future. I got 3 guys in particular that I'm excited to see this season and to see if they'll be able to take advantage of the opportunity that they are expected to be given. I'll give you all 3 names and then we'll hit each one by one. Khristian Boyd, defensive tackle who was drafted last year going into his second year. Kool-Aid McKinstry going into his second year as well, also drafted last year in the second round. And then Isaiah Foskey, who was drafted a couple years ago, and is now looking for the potential to finally be able to step into a larger role than just special teams, which is kind of where he's been relegated to since he's been here in New Orleans. I actually want to start off with Isaiah Foskey because I want to take us all the way back to Isaiah Foskey getting drafted. And there were a lot of people that asked question marks around Isaiah because of the fact that they remembered the Peyton Turner pick in the first round. They remembered the Marcus Davenport pick in the first round. And I was pretty gung-ho on the idea that, like, okay, Isaiah Foskey's not Peyton Turner. He's not Marcus Davenport, but he's had a similar trajectory since he's been here in New Orleans. He started off with some injuries and then hasn't really ever been able to work his way out onto the field. Now it's going to be really interesting to find out how much of that was really about Isaiah Foskey and how much of that was about Dennis Allen and his defense, what worked, what didn't work, roles, things like that. We know that this defense has been notorious for, unfortunately, putting players in position to not succeed. And so finding ways for Isaiah Foskey to succeed might have been a bigger challenge than it needed to be with the previous regime. Now we'll see if that begins to change here under Brandon Staley and a very different approach to the coaching staff. And when I say very different approach to the coaching staff, I mean, there's not just a defensive line coach like a Bo Davis or like a Todd Grantham before that, and so on and so forth. Instead, you're talking about a defensive line coach in Bo Davis, but also an edges coach in Jay Rodgers. And so what does it look like all of a sudden when you have a focused coach along with an assistant defensive line coach, former pass rush specialist in Brian Young, who's been there, done that? What does it look like when all of a sudden the edge guys are getting their coaching from somebody that focuses on the edge rushers? And the interior guys are getting their coaching from somebody that's focused on the interior. What does that end up doing for this team? So I'm really excited to see what it does for the team. And I'm excited for what it does to a guy like Isaiah Foskey as well. Again, going back to when he was drafted, the thing that was different for me when it came to Isaiah Foskey was production. I'll remind you that Isaiah Foskey had 11 sacks in each of his last 2 seasons, 22 total sacks over the course of the last 2 seasons with Notre Dame, a proven national championship level, blue chip quality organization, team, athletics program, whatever it is that you want to call it. But from Houston, when it came to Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey had more sacks in one season than Peyton Turner had his entire career at Houston, which somehow made him a first-round pick. You heard that right. Peyton Turner had 10 sacks over the course of his 4 years with the Houston Cougars, playing at a lower level in the American Conference at that time, and had fewer sacks in his entire career than Isaiah Foskey had in one season, either of the last two of his college years. You go back to Marcus Davenport, who did everything that he was doing in Conference USA up against UT, or as a part of University of Texas, San Antonio, the Roadrunners. 21 and a half sacks over the course of his 4 years there. Isaiah Foskey passed that in his final 2 years of college production. So I'm not here to say that Isaiah Foskey is going to be the next great thing. He's going to be the next best thing or anything like that. But I am saying that he's somebody that clearly has some potential that the Saints have not been able to successfully tap into yet. And if they have tapped into it, they haven't been able to tap into it in a way that has been sustainable. Kind of similar to what we were just talking about over on the offensive side. So I'm curious to see if with more focused coaching, with more stand-up pass rushing, and with more odd fronts with that stand-up pass rusher over on the outside, if that ends up allowing Isaiah Foskey to do something that Peyton Turner and Marcus Davenport could not do when they were here in New Orleans, and that's turn a corner before it's too late. I want to discuss Khristian Boyd next. I don't think I said I was going to name all three. Did I name all three? And then I went through and then I just stuck with Isaiah Foskey. Well, just in case, the other two are Khristian Boyd and Kool-Aid McKinstry. All right. We're not all perfect. So I want to go back to Khristian Boyd next. Khristian Boyd, I think, is an interesting one because at his size, 6'4", 310 plus pounds, coming out of Northern Iowa, he is a quintessential 0-tech, 1-tech defensive tackle. He's a run plugger, had 24 run stops during his final year with Northern Iowa. He also only missed 5 tackles during that season, despite corralling 40 total tackles in that year as well. So he was a solid tackler, solid in the run game. It was also a solid pass rusher as well, putting pressure on quarterbacks, all those other things. Came up with a total of 28 hurries during his final, or excuse me, actually it was 40 total hurries, not 40 tackles. So it was 40 total hurries during his time with Northern Iowa. So you saw him get into the backfield and do all those other things. But with those 29 total tackles, not 40 total tackles, I got my numbers mixed up there. Sorry about that. 29 total tackles, only 5 missed, and then being able to get 24 run stops or defensive stops in the process. I think that there's a good chance here that Khristian Boyd is somebody that could potentially end up benefiting from the change, much like Isaiah Foskey, in the New Orleans Saints defensive scheme. So I'm excited to see what it is that maybe he's able to do. We'll see how much opportunity he really gets here in 2025. I think he'll be in line for a larger role than what he had during his rookie season, but I don't know exactly how large that role is with Devon Godchaux and Colin Saunders or added, and Colin Saunders back, and Nathan Shepard back, and Jonah Williams added, and Brian Brzee still there, and so far John Ridgway III still there as well. So Khristian Boyd's going to have to make it through training camp and all the other stuff. But if he does that and sticks on this roster, it's going to be really interesting to see if maybe he gets to have a little bit more opportunity rather than being a healthy scratch like he was a little bit too often than you'd like last season. And that's not a commentary on Khristian Boyd. It's just, what are the Saints? What's the Saints rotation plan? All these other things. So where does he fit? And then finally, as I mentioned, Kool-Aid McKinstry. This defense should put Kool-Aid McKinstry right back at home. And he was kind of right back at home last year. Last year, he allowed just a 56.1% completion percentage. That was the 5th best amongst all rookie corners in the NFL that saw at least 30 targets, according to 33rd Team, Pro Football Focus, and Next Gen Stats. Conglomeration of all of those, of all those. And that included postseason, by the way, which Kool-Aid McKinstry didn't see any postseason snaps, obviously. And so I just think that this being that pattern matching defense, Rip Liz, having the star role, kind of having all these rules that are going to be very similar to Nick Saban styles of defense. You look at the defensive coaching staff and how, much of that Saban influence and the influences of guys around that, that tree of coaches are around and on this coaching staff. And I think that that's a really, really good spot for a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry to land, who should be the starting corner opposite whomever, with Alontae Taylor in the slot. And we assume it's Isaac Yiadom right now. Will it continue to be? Will the Saints invest in another cornerback in free agency, or will they draft one? We'll see. But no matter what, Kool-Aid McKinstry is one of your starting outside corners. And you should feel pretty good about that because he was pretty impressive and just got better and better and better throughout his rookie season as well. So very much looking forward to seeing all three of those guys, Isaiah Foskey, Khristian Boyd, Kool-Aid McKinstry into who's able to take the most advantage of the expanded opportunity that they could earn here in 2025. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're taking a look at our next mock draft. I want to do two. I want to build the trenches. I want to build the secondary. That's kind of where I want to go with all this as we continue on with our mock draft Mondays, heading in and getting closer to the month of April with the draft on the way. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.